All right, the audit's done, you've gathered all the evidence. So now for what's maybe the most critical step of all, turning that mountain of data into a report that's clear, powerful, and actually drives action. Let's break down how to get it done. Okay, so picture this. The investigation is over. You're sitting there staring at this mountain of notes, logs, and interview transcripts. It can feel pretty overwhelming, right? The big question is, how on earth do you turn all this raw information into a coherent story that leads to real change? Because here's the trap we have to avoid. That whole he said, she said situation. If your report just feels like it's your opinion, people can argue with it. They can dismiss it. Our goal is to make our findings so fact-based, so scientific, that they are simply undeniable. So, how do you start bringing some order to all that chaos? Well, the first step is to grade your findings. Think of it like a sorting hat for everything you observed. You need a system to classify just how severe each issue is. Because, let's be honest, not all problems are created equal. I mean, think about it this way. A missing signature on a document, that's a problem, for sure. But finding pests in a sterile production area, that is a full-blown crisis. If you treat both of those things with the same level of urgency in your report, you're going to lose all credibility and nobody will know what to focus on. So the industry standard for this is a pretty simple 3-tier system: critical, major, and minor. And really, the big difference between them, it all comes down to scope and risk. A critical finding is about immediate danger. A major one points to a broken process, and a minor finding is usually just an isolated human error. Let's start at the very top. A critical non-conformity. I mean, this is a full-on red alert. This is not just a mistake, it is a direct threat to a patient or to the product itself. We're talking about things like data fraud or contamination. This is the kind of thing that triggers an immediate stop work order and needs a response, like right now, often within 24 to 48 hours. All right, next up is a major nonconformity. The word to remember here is system failure. This isn't about one person messing up. It's proof that an entire process has broken down. Like, for example, discovering that an entire department has 0 training records. It's a huge red flag that the whole system needs to be reevaluated. And finally, we've got the minor nonconformities. These are your single, isolated slip-ups, a typo in a document or one signature missing from a logbook. But here's the thing, and it's really important. Minor doesn't mean you can ignore it. It's still a violation of the rules, and it still has to be fixed. The key difference is that it doesn't suggest the whole system is collapsing.
Okay, so now we know how to grade our findings, but how do we actually write them? This is where our second essential tool comes in, a super simple 3-part formula that takes your observations and turns them from subjective opinions into objective scientific facts.
It's called the Criteria Condition Consequence Formula, or just CCC for short. And honestly, this is the absolute bedrock of a good audit report. If you use these 3 components for every single one of your findings, you build a case that is logical, evidence-based, and pretty much impossible to argue with. Let's build one out, starting with criteria. This is just the rule. You have to anchor every single finding to a specific requirement that's already on the books. You're not saying, hey, I think this room should be cleaner. Nope. You're stating your own procedure, SOP CLN02, requires this room to be cleaned daily. See how that totally removes your personal opinion from the picture? Next up, the condition. This is the evidence. This is where you state exactly what you observed that breaks the rule. And you gotta be specific. Not just the log was messy, but the cleaning log for June 1st was blank. You're presenting just the cold, hard, objective facts. And finally, the consequence. This is the risk, and it answers the most important question of all. So what? Why does any of this even matter? By spelling out the potential impact, in this case, the risk of contamination, you're giving everyone the why. You're explaining why this finding has to be taken seriously. Okay, let's pause for a really important distinction here. Because not everything you spot during an audit is actually a rule violation. Sometimes you see stuff that's technically fine, but it could be way better. This is where we need to know the difference between a required fix and just a helpful suggestion. So you have a non-conformity, an NC. That's a black and white failure to meet a requirement. It has to be fixed, period. But then you have an observation or an opportunity for improvement, an OFI. That's totally different. It's a recommendation. It's not a failure, but a suggestion to improve things like safety or efficiency. Here's a perfect example. Let's say the lighting in a warehouse meets the bare minimum standard, so technically it's compliant, but, it's pretty dim. Suggesting they install brighter lights to make reading labels easier and prevent future errors? That's a classic OFI. This is where you, the auditor, get to be more of a strategic partner. All right, we've graded our findings. We've written them up perfectly using the CCC formula. Now it's time to put it all together into the final audit report. And a professional report isn't just a list of what's wrong. It's a structured document that's designed to be understood and acted on.
Now, a standard report has a few key parts, but I want to zoom in on one that people often forget: positive findings. Seriously, starting your report with what the team is doing well is a game changer. It shows you are fair and balanced, and it makes people way more open to hearing the tough stuff that comes next.
And look, this structure isn't just something we made up. It's based on established industry standards, like the framework from the Active Pharmaceutical Ingredients Committee, or APIC. Using a recognized format like that just lends instant credibility and professionalism to your work. It ensures the report gets taken seriously. So as we wrap this up, it's so important to remember the real point of all this. It's easy to think of handing in the audit report as the finish line, but really, it's the complete opposite. It's the starting line. Here's the most important thing to take away from all this. A great audit report is never, ever an accusation. It's not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's a diagnosis of a system's health. And like any diagnosis, its only real purpose is to kick off the cure. In our world, that's the corrective and preventative action process, or CAPA. So yeah, an audit report doesn't end the story. It starts it. It's the beginning of the solution. Which leaves us with the biggest and most important question of all. Once you've delivered the diagnosis, what happens next?